Chris here with P2T Canine, and it's time to do another dog talk. As you already know, P2T Canine is an equipment company. If you'd go over to p2tcanine.com and check out the equipment offerings there and see what you think, I would surely appreciate it. This week, I have a challenge in front of me. I've been challenged by At Frequency Canine, pet training, training of all kinds down in the panhandle of Florida, has challenged me to do a down and dirty, one subject, 15-18 minute around the world on a subject and get that done. So I'm going to do a time check and I'm going to do the best I can to accommodate that request and see how that goes over. I know I go long on a lot of these videos, but I don't like to do drive-bys on these subjects, and I've gotten feedback from other people that know me that say they really appreciate the deep dive. But with that being said, we're going to try one of these shorter formats. First of all, see if I can pull it off and then see how well that's received. So with that being said, we're going to go practical to tactical on aid placement. How important is aid placement? It is absolutely critical. What kind of aid, you might be asking? Doesn't matter. All of them, any of them, everything. So what do we need to know about our aid placement? Aid placement is not just hiding objects or odors or samples of target odors for a dog to find. We are actually training the dog to a much larger degree than most people realize when we put out our training aids, and aid placement is the way that we do that. Aid placement is not just limited to narcotics, explosives, human remains. This also includes patrol settings, building searches, tracking, locations on tracking. All of these things matter. So let me go back to the beginning. One thing that I've heard my entire career is dogs are cheaters, dogs are lazy. I want to push back on that a bit. It's not that they're cheaters or that they are lazy. People do not understand how dogs see the world, and they expect anthropomorphic human types of expectations out of the dogs when that is not how the dog sees the world. And I've mentioned it in other videos. That is the biggest thing that stands between us and more success in the working dog arena, and also in the pet training arena, is that we don't understand how dogs see the world. Again, I will bring this up. Once you learn how a dog learns and how they see the world, you've got the whole combination cracked. Everything is downhill from there. I know that sounds simplified and reductionist, and it is, but that doesn't mean that it's not true. It's just a really simple explanation of something that is a little bit complicated, but once you crack that code, it will be so clear to you. So why do I want to push back on dogs are cheaters and dogs are lazy? They aren't really cheaters and they aren't really lazy. So picture this. And this is the way I explain it to a lot of new handlers or people new to the subject. If I'm doing training, doing a public speaking engagement, immediately I go to this area to try to find some common understanding of concepts so that people can wrap their mind around it. And the first one that I go to in one of these type of speaking engagements or training events is, where are my hunters and or fishermen at? So if you and I are out in a boat and we're fishing and we're going along this piece of rocky bank, and then there is a bush that is down in the water, and one or both of us catch fish, and we get 2 or 3 fish in the boat off of this bush, and then we fish another 100 yards of rocky bank and nothing happens, but then we happen upon another bush that's down in the water, and both of us catch a couple of fish, maybe more, 2 to 4 off of this bush. Then we fish another 100 or 150 yards of rocky bank and nothing happens, and then we get to that third bush and we both catch fish on that, or even one. Immediately we're going to look down the shoreline to the next bush, and we are going, both of us, perhaps with speaking or without, we're just going to kick that electric motor on high, and we're going to skip all of that rocky bank, that has been unproductive so far, and we are going to the next identifiable piece of cover that has been productive the last 3 bushes in a row. And we are immediately going to start, and in fishing, it's called developing a pattern. So we're going to work on developing our pattern on how are we catching these fish, and we're going to work diligently to eliminate unproductive effort and maximize productive effort. So if these bushes have been productive, we are instantly just going to start bush hunting, skipping all of the water that has been unproductive so far this morning and hitting the things that have been productive. And how long will we stick with that as fishermen? Could be for an extended period, but we're going to beat those bushes up until they are no longer productive. And then we're going to relax off of that initial pattern and start trying to open back up and do other things until we get back into the fish. On the hunter's side of the table, if you want to go out and hunt deer, for example, if you're going to do any kind of bird hunting, there are places where you have scouted, where you use previous experience that you've developed over the years in doing this, and you're going to try to eliminate unproductive efforts, unproductive areas, and focus in on the ones where you really think that something's going to happen. If you're bird hunting, if you're a bird hunter, do you go out and hunt flat, naked ground? Do you go hunt a parking lot? No, you don't, because game birds don't have cover on a parking lot and they don't hide out there on the bare ground. So when you get into a field, if your dog starts pointing and alerting, if you're kicking up birds that are clinging to certain cover, if it's a particular kind of year, if the area, the biome that you're in has certain plants growing and you keep finding birds relating to certain kinds of grass or certain kinds of growth, that's where you're going to focus your effort. Saying all that to say this, the dog does the same thing. So when we are placing our aids, no matter what those aids are, this is how we teach the dog what to hunt and what is important. Why do people go and say dogs are cheaters and dogs are lazy? I covered this in the principles of canine detection. We're going to steal from the marksmanship arena, and we're going to say the DOPE, the data on previous engagements. Dogs, if you are remarking that your dog is cheating or lazy, your dog has had poor aid placement, and this dog is now trying to use data on previous engagement. They're trying to use that fishing or hunting principle of where have I found things in an environment that looks similar to the one I'm in now? What has been historically productive? I'm going to go and focus my efforts to try to maximize production by hitting these areas that have been known in the past to be productive. Doing nothing different than skipping rock bank to go hit those hot bushes if that seems to be the pattern. So how do we avoid that? That's with your aid placement. Also covered during the seminar recap and training scars, putting those aids in these 3D object easy button locations are not a good way to teach your dog. That is a dog that will learn to try to work these patterns, and then that's when people verbalize it as, oh, my dog is lazy or my dog is a cheater. They really aren't. They're just following the pattern that's been set forth to them historically by either uninformed or some lazy easy button planting of aids. Additionally, because I mentioned up front that this extends beyond just detection dogs with anything, whatever your target odor is, narc, explosives, human remains, whatever, guns and ammunition, electronic devices, cell phones, things of that nature. Any of these where you are planting these objects out into a real world setting to have the dog find them, there is value in putting them in real world settings, but then you also challenge the dog and make them search the entire environment. How do they search the entire environment? By you having good aid placement and keeping that possibility alive in the dog's mind. So let's go back to our fishing example. If we are fishing between bushes and we're catching on bushes, but in that 100-yard span of bank where it's just rocks between bushes, if we catch one or two, are we going to repeat the behavior that I mentioned before where we put the electric motor on high and skip 100, 150 yards of rock bank to get to the next visible bush? If you and I have been fishing and we're picking up one or two fish along the way, and if they're decent ones between the bushes, we're not going to blow off the rock bank anymore. We're going to pay attention and go ahead and fish, because in our mind, hope still exists that this could be productive between the 2 points that are certainly productive. But because we don't want to miss that opportunity, we're going to continue to work that stretch of bank between those bushes. Same thing with the dogs. If we're in here and we're putting aids out in an operational interior environment, yeah, you can hit some of the areas that have been historically productive, but then you need to be creative and keep the rest of the room relevant. Make sure that there's at least hope in the dog's mind that there could be something between here and there, so that they will continue to work here and there. That will mitigate you saying, well, I have a lazy dog, I have a cheater, because if we're using good aid placement, it keeps the possibility of that span between obvious objects being productive alive. Let's extrapolate that out to MPCs, where we do off-leash bomb detection on roadways and open areas. I want to talk about a roadway for a moment specifically. Time check. Golly, 11 minutes. This goes fast. So on a roadway, I need to do left-hand hides, left shoulder of the road, right shoulder of the road. There are some roads that I don't physically have the ability to dig a hole in or disrupt the roadway and put something in the middle. Can I get away with that in some limited cases? Yes, I can. And I do that. I will go to places where only the left and right shoulders of the road are open to hide placement, and maybe it's a nice paved road where I can't go digging a hole. There are no potholes. There's no alligator pavement with the broken chunks where I can pull a chunk up and dig into the base below it and put an aid in that. I can do that once in a while, but if I only stick to roads where I cannot put aid placement in the middle of the road, I'm going to have shoulder detector dogs. Some people might explain that away as the dog being a cheater or being lazy. The dog is just working on data of previous engagements. They have not had the opportunity in this example to find something in the roadway. The roadway has been historically unproductive, and then you're going to see that interest in the roadway extinct out over time because nothing's going on in the middle of the road. That's why I have to make sure when I'm doing these route clears that I'm finding roadways that I can get out there in the middle and keep the possibility of the middle of the road being alive. I don't even have to do aid placement at the same ratio in the center of the road as I do on the left and right shoulders, but I do have to have it in there frequently enough so that in the dog's mind, this is still a possibility, just like that rock bank between bushes, where I'm going to put a little bit of effort into hitting that because I just might find something out there and find that it's productive. Building searches. This has been mentioned before in some of my other videos, but I want to recap it because it's germane to the topic, and I'm trying to condense this into this short talk. Same thing with building searches. If you want your dog to work the problem and spend more time searching, then dress out 2 or 3 decoys the same way that I talked about in seminar recap and training scars. Have a guy at the doorway. Do not teach your dog to disregard and blow off a doorway because you only dress out 1 decoy and you want the dog to work because you're using anthropomorphic human views and values on this training, thinking the dog's only going to get maximum training value out of it if I make him work to the back of the building to locate the guy in the bite equipment and do the location and detection at the back of the building, where the dog has to exert effort and spend a certain amount of time that we feel is appropriate in locating and obtaining the decoy, the role player. You just taught your dog to run to the back of the building. Just like we learned in the fishing example, if we hit a bush and the bush has good fish and then we go a distance and there are no fish and then we find them on the next bush, If your dog is introduced to a building enough times where the role player is all the way in the back or on the second floor or in the top of a closet in the most far away high recess that you can possibly stuff a person, then that's where the dog's going to go. And it won't take that many reps before they are absolutely dialed in on, you make your announcement from the door or you don't announce, as the case may be with the unit that you're working in, but you let this dog go from the door and they're going to haul ass to the back of the building, to the second floor, to the farthest reach that they can physically get to, then begin using their nose. So they're going to eliminate all of that rocky bank and blow by all of that area because it's historically unproductive to go to try to find the area that's been historically productive, so then they can get down to business. This creates a massive problem for you because what if the guy's hiding in the first room, maybe even right inside the threshold at the doorway, and your dog is just trying to go full send to the back of this building because that's what is historically productive. Tracking. Look, again, golly, 16 minutes. Again, if you want to have a dog track to a bite, don't do that all the time. I can go into it on a longer video if people want to put something in the comments and hear about it. A dog that goes to a single outcome every time they're engaged in a task will carry out that outcome even in the absence of being able to do that. If you track to a bite routinely in training and you are tracking with a security element with cover officers, and especially in this day and age, if they've made a cell phone call and got picked up, and you find a clothing item or you get back out to a roadway and the dog loses it and you're pretty sure that they got picked up a ride from a vehicle, they called somebody, you are putting real possibility out there that your cover officers are going to get bit. And I have seen this happen in real life and in training. This dog just ran a track and got to the end of the scent, and they're at the dead end, and they feel super gypped that there's not somebody out there to bite. They're going to find somebody to bite. Guarantee you, if you do it enough, this will be the result. So track to a toy very, very frequently. The majority of your tracks should be to a toy or reward object upwards of 75% of the time. You can do a decoy, a live role player, and do some where they don't always get to bite. What if you go and you're tracking and the dog gets close to the guy and they pop up and want to surrender? Go back and look at some of my previous videos where I talked about the surveillance state. Everybody, a lot of agencies are wearing body cams. There are Ring doorbells. There are surveillance systems on buildings and businesses, and you may be adjacent to a property that has exterior surveillance and your final apprehension is on video from a property that's not even involved in the incident. But if this guy pops up and says, hey, I changed my mind, I want to give up, and you can't get that dog under control, you're creating a safety hazard for you and the suspect if your dog is so intent on biting that you can't get them under control while you go ahead and finish the apprehension because the dog is used to closing on a bite every single time. How do you mitigate this if you're going to do a role player? If you are going to put a role player out there, do not hide behind brush piles, down trees, big fat trees, anything that you would look at surface level and say, oh, that's a great place for a person to hide. Don't get there. My number one technique for training dogs to a bite, I will find me a nice low grass area, or even in the woods, I will find an area that rolls off into a ditch or has a depression. And again, remember, your dog's eyes are only 1.5 feet off the ground. They don't have that line of sight that you do from being up here 5.5, 6.5, 7 feet tall, however big you are. You can see on the ground distance at an object on the ground at a greater distance than your dog can because their perspective is so much lower. So you don't need a giant chasm to hide a person. You just need a shallow shelf, a little to drop off into a roadway, even a little shallow low spot will do. If the dog is within its last 5 to 3 feet of this person before it's visible to the dog, that's great. If I can have the dog nose down tracking and bump into me and then raise up and look and then make the attack, that is great. So always your final leg on tracking needs to be the downwind flank, moving with the wind, pushing scent from your role player away from the dog and into a shallow depression or a nondescript roll in the horizon that has nothing on it. Why are we doing that? Same reason that I told you to stay away from the three-dimensional objects in the principles of canine detection and in the training scars and seminar recap video. Same thing applies in the woods. If your dog is finding people at big trees, at blown down trees, at brush piles, when your dog is going through the woods, they will break off from an orderly area search or from a track to run over and check these big three-dimensional objects that have been historically productive. That doesn't make them lazy. It doesn't make them cheaters. It makes them remember things that are productive and try to focus their effort on productive actions. So I want to try to phrase that in a way to help people that don't understand this concept get it across that the dog is not being lazy. They are doing what has been historically productive that they know can help them secure what they're looking for to get that outcome that they're used to in this working environment. On the cars, I know 21 minutes hurts so bad. On cars, same thing. I covered in principles of canine detection. Work the whole vehicle. Don't be lazy. If you and I are training and I see you open a gas tank lid and throw a training aid inside the gas tank flap and shut it, we're going to have a serious discussion. You don't. It's just as bad and as ugly as using the paper towel dispenser in every bathroom or every kitchen. Unless you're going to go through the trouble of putting a string on your training aid for recovery and taking the gas cap off and going down the filler neck and getting this thing down in there, don't even waste the dog's time putting it in the gas cap. That is just a lazy bullshit hide that the dog is only going to learn bad behavior from. So as much as I want to just riff on with this thing and go on and on, I'm going to hold it there because that's what I was asked to do and bring this one in for a landing. The dog learns what's productive by what we put out and where we put it. That is the bottom line. Think about the fishing. Think about what the dog is doing. One of the best pieces of advice that I've heard, your training records are not for court. Your training records are really for you. They're to teach you. You need to look back and look at patterns, both good and detrimental patterns, and learn from them and modify what you're doing in your training. Make sure you get enough blanks in. Make sure you're not having repeat, lazy, ill-conceived hides. Make sure that your duration for these searches is extended out, and you should have a good, well-rounded detection and or patrol dog, because again, aid placement applies to all of the above. It's not limited to narc dogs or bomb dogs. It's every single dog. Every time they find what they're looking for, they remember, they make a mental record of where did I find that, and in the next iteration where they get to go and try to repeat the process, they are going to try to shorten that curve to the greatest extent possible, not because they're lazy, not because they're cheaters, because just like me and you in the boat, we like to catch fish. The dog likes to get toys. If we put them into an environment where they can go and find something and get a toy for it, if I can catch a fish and I can speed up that curve, if I can shorten the time between that dopamine hit of me being able to catch a fish and put it in the boat, that's what I'm going to do. It's called making a pattern. So hope you all appreciated this or like this one. Thanks to Frequency Canine for the input, the feedback on it. If you want to see shorter stuff, let me know. If you like the longer ones, let me know. If there's a subject you want covered in longer, short format, by all means, put it in the YouTube comments or hit me up on the Insties. Thank you for watching.